Hey everyone. So today we have a special guest who's built a phenomenal company. His name is Krish, and he's the founder and CEO of a company called ChargeBee. Now, ChargeBee is one of the first, SaaS platforms in, the payment industry. One of the pioneers in it. One of the first ones in the sense what they do. And I'm very excited to have him here to share his fascinating story of how he began his company. He's also one of the first pioneers of the last decade to be one of the first entrepreneurs in India to go ahead and build out an amazing company. And I'm very excited to have him here with us to share his story. So Krish, thank you so much for joining us and agreeing to share your story with us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Prem. Nice talking to everyone. Thank you for the opportunity.
Sure, it's our pleasure. So take us through all the way from the beginning. Let's jump right in. Where are you from? What was your upbringing like?
So I grew up in Chennai. It was called, the city used to be called Madras 30 years back. The city has a 400-year-old story to it, and it was called Madras, and 30 years back it was renamed as Chennai. It's a coastal town. It's almost like Florida kind of weather, tropical, with wet monsoon, but the rest of the seasons are like hotter and hottest. And I was born and brought up here. This is south of India, southeast. And I grew up in a very conservative household, lower middle class, or rather middle class. And my father was a government servant, mom was a homemaker. And I was good at studies, and I went on to, like most middle class parents, I was pushed towards academics and encouraged to do that. And then I did my B in computer science and engineering. And that is when I met one of my co-founders, Rajaraman. And we never knew that at that time, right? I was not even close friends with him then. And we were classmates, that's all. And even after graduating, I went and worked at different companies for over 10 years. I used to specialize in this product called Ariba, which was into indirect purchasing and spend management. And I implemented that for over 7.5, 8 years in just that product. And before that, I worked in a small company, small startup, and then this long stint in a large company. So total of 10 years of experience. And Rajaraman, interestingly, went and worked in a very small company then. Today, we all know that as Zoho. But before it became Zoho, he was part of Advenet. Advenet was the original name of that company. And he worked there for over 10 years, was part of different product teams. At some point of time, he started his own product. And most of the product thinking comes from him. The inspiration to want to start a company also comes from him, that we should start a company like this. And for me, it was more of Joel Spolsky. We all know Trello today, right? So Joel Spolsky, back in the days of 2000, 2001, used to blog heavily about his company called Fog Creek Software, which created bug tracking software, which is a very boring problem, but solved in very interesting ways. And he used to tell the story of how he's building the company on his blog. And that used to be my inspiration, that I should start a company like that. Right? And as a founder, he used to talk about how his job is getting chairs out of the way so smart people can get the job done. And that was one of our early inspirations to say, we want to learn how to build a company together. It was not about, okay, we want to solve subscription billing, right? 10 years back, we had no idea. But for 8 years, while working in different companies, we saved up enough to say, at some point of time, we want to quit our safe jobs and start, which means that we need the right financial cushion. So we planned for over several years to say, at some point we'll quit. It could be a decade-old dream. We just kept saving money to keep away so that we save enough to feel comfortable to quit. And also, of course, acquire skills so that we remain employable if things go wrong. Yeah. So it was a 10-year career built over a period of time.
That's a brilliant strategy. I'm surprised more people don't do that, in the sense that constantly save up for the time when they're going to build a startup, because a lot of times the stories always go, and you always hear from countless of founders, is that, they're onto their last paycheck and they had no other choice. And then finally something came in.
You quit.
Yeah. So the fact that you were able to save up, and you knew, first of all, that you wanted to be an entrepreneur and start your own company. and you were saving up for that time. I think it's amazing. That's a great thing to do.
So in one of the blogs or somewhere I read this, and then we keep talking about it. This is the art of taking the long cut, right? You just de-risk, right, over a period of time, because I couldn't have taken the risk because families were dependent, and then being a first generation where you're actually getting the opportunity to getting exposed to the IT, and then that earning potential and all that opens up a very interesting opportunity where you are also thankful that you are at the right place at the right time. So it's almost like pulling up your family with you because of your earning potential, right? You don't want to give up on that too soon to just take like some crazy decision. So which means that your conservative mindset comes into play, where you actually try and build on it, where you feel like, okay, so now I can actually take the next leap of faith to try something else. But 2010, 2011 was something interesting. I think we are shifting gears. So around the 2009, 2010 timeframe, I came back to India end of 2009. I used to be in US for over 3.5 years in Midwest. I was working there, working with various customers. But I wanted to start a company at some point and decided not to pursue that stint, and came back home. Around that time frame is when SaaS was taking off in some sense, right? We know 1999 was Salesforce creating this company, and then it took a decade for them to build conviction in the B2B SaaS space that SaaS companies can get created, right? And Basecamp, and I'm throwing names in case somebody is not familiar, check out the websites, right? Basecamp has a from 2005, they started this company, which was a small SMB-focused SaaS company, right? And bootstrap, beautifully built out of Chicago. And for us, many of these aspirations, and then many people actually sharing and building companies out in the open was our biggest learning experience. And so SaaS was taking off by mid 2010, 2011. B2B, we only understand B2B really well, right? Because of our decade of experience working only with businesses. And we wanted this to be a global play, right? Even though the company will get started out of, born in Chennai, right, as a company, we were very clear that from the beginning it has to be a global play. We wanted to build a company for the global audience and also have people working with us globally. Today we have customers from 53 countries. We have customers from 53 countries. We process over $1 billion of transactions from our customers from all these countries. We are enabling that many businesses, but it all started from out of an apartment, right? So this 7-8 years, Rajaraman used to have this small apartment, 2-bedroom apartment that was rented. And the rent used to be, I think, less than 10,000 rupees or 11,000 rupees, which is like less than $250.
Oh, wow.
Per month. And we took this apartment and then put a screen in that and said, okay, this side is one guy's home, and then the other side is the apartment. We put 4 tables, bought our own laptops, and we just started building stuff.
Wow. So I'm going to cut you off for a second. So from my understanding, I think, didn't the idea start a little bit earlier? You're in the United States, and you broke by July 4th weekend. There's a story that goes back, you're 26 years old, and you broke your leg in America.
Oh yeah. So how did you actually discover that?
So isn't that and that's where you got stuck, and that's where a lot of the idea also came from, no?
Correct. So not the problem idea as such, right? The problem space that we wanted to solve happened in 2000, only after quitting, right? All 4 of us quit and said we are going to build a company together, and only then we picked up one of the ideas that we were just debating. For me personally, right? So Rajaraman used to talk about, one of the co-founders used to talk about wanting to start a company even before that. But for me, it was almost so. I was this 4th of July weekend. I was driving from New York to Washington and met with an accident, roughly I think after midnight. And so I was there in US for over 7 months. I was on crutches, wheelchair, and then recovering, but with friends. But that phase was pretty interesting for me personally, as an individual to grow up. Right, I was a 25, 26-year-old in a place where I was without parents, no family, and all that. And then I had to recover on my own. But that gave me a lot of confidence to actually believe, a lot of alone time to think. Right, and I used to be someone who used to apply my skills and was very proud of that and a little arrogant, right, to some extent. To a large extent. I'm not saying I'm not now, but then I'm just saying. And then I was more. But it just reset perspectives in life, started noticing all the little things that were actually amazing. And all the way from how um, the workplace that is designed or the entire life that is designed where you're self-sufficient is actually very interesting, right? At the apartment that I used to live in Indiana, Columbus, never did not have a good physically challenged ramp or anything. So I was dependent on my friends to actually get me out till I was strong enough to actually lift my own self plus the wheelchair. But I was dependent. But once I was out there, and then I could drive my car, I could go for my own therapy, I could go to office, get off the wheelchair, and then go into office. And every single detail, I never noticed that I could actually, while going there, there was a button at this level where I could just press from a chair, that door opens, and I could just roll in, and it stays open till I actually cross. And I was over it, right? These little things I never noticed when I could just breeze through walking.
So you started appreciating the little things in life. It really gave
Exactly.
you perspective. That's amazing.
You start being thankful for everything around you, right? And then you also learn to remain cheerful despite having this fear that as a 26-year-old, you don't know whether you're going to walk again the same way you used to, right? Whether you could run again the same way you used to. And this fear of this unknown that at some point, would you actually be able to walk is a question mark. And yet you learn to deal with life as if, okay, this is how it's going to be, right? I'm not going to like let myself get bogged down by whatever it is, right? And then you actually start getting back to work and go around everywhere. And, yeah. And I used to play badminton. I had some really good friends. I used to actually practice badminton while being in wheelchair with one hand. That was pretty interesting.
So let's go continue further. So that was one thing. And then you had ChargeBee was, from my understanding, one of the ways also that it came about was that you pitched it at an event. You were at some event and you pitched it over there, and the investor that was running the event said, hey, why don't you go ahead and do it? Because a lot of people had this issue about renewing payments. And so you went home to your wife and you told your wife you're quitting your job. It was over the weekend. And how was your wife's reaction? What did she say? You know?
Yeah, so at the time of actually quitting, we were married for close to 2.5 years. Yeah, close to 3 years then. And we had a 1.5-year-old kid, boy, who was ready to go to school, getting ready to go to school, and had the safe job and all that. But yeah, so one was the event itself was a networking event. I was just pitching ideas. And this was an unconference session where I pitched this idea about recurring invoicing management and all that. And this mentor, Dorai Thodla, he was one of he's now close to 65 plus or 70 plus, who still writes Python code and then teaches kids in schools. And he spent 6 months in Valley, 6 months here in India. And then he actually encouraged me saying, this is a brilliant idea. You should actually solve it, because he said, show of hands, how many of you think you will pay for this product and all that. And ours was the idea where everybody was actually showing their hands up saying, okay, I think I'll need this. And it's like, why are you still working? Then he said, okay, how long have you been working on Scrum? I said, no, I'm still working in a job. He said, what? Why haven't you quit yet? And then start the company. And then I was like, oh, okay, I should go and start. And then came back, told my wife. And then till that point, she was thinking that I was just saying things and then I may not really quit and all that. She had this idea that at some point I'll quit, but it was not a question of immediately, that she didn't see that coming. But she was very supportive. She said, okay, so if you've thought through it, then that's great. I said, yeah, don't worry. Next 2 years, we'll have enough savings. No worries, we'll figure it out. But the more important, interesting conversation, tough one, was for me to call up my father-in-law and then let him know. It was in the Middle East.
I can imagine from an Indian parent, that's all about, safety and education and not taking this crazy risk. You went crazy probably.
Right. Yeah. But he was very supportive. I just told him that, okay, I'm going to quit my job and then start a company. And I think we'll be okay, right? I have savings for the next 2-3 years. I think we will somehow manage through it. What I did not see, and Vision 2020 back behind hindsight, is that everything takes twice as long. Everything takes twice more money than resources than you thought in the beginning. That was actually the part that I did not realize, but then it was an all-in journey. So,
yeah. So then, what were let's see. So obviously, you quit your job, you found your co-founders. What were the early challenges that you had and that you needed to overcome? In the early days of ChargeBee.
One was definitely the when we were building the product, right? We never thought about or tried to understand everything about all the different options in which you can actually build a company, right? We did not even know that you could actually raise capital from outside. We just wanted to build a company together, and we said no matter whether with or without investment, we are going to build a company. But the downside of that is, even if we are going to do it with your own company, it needs to be done with certain level of urgency. It cannot be in your own vacuum. I think I would definitely say that is one of the mistakes to avoid in terms of the urgency with which something needs to be done. It's not just from the problem opportunity perspective, it is also from doing justice to your own time. Because as an entrepreneur, if you're actually quitting your job, trying to solve a problem, it is important to ensure that you're spending your prime years trying to solve a problem, right? And then that validation is not about just building the solution, it's about building the right solution that people really care about, right? It's one thing to have the conviction, but it's another thing to have the right validation from the market to know that this is worth solving.
Right.
And that validation happens only when people start paying for it and say, yes, this made my life easy, so here's money. I don't want to live without the solution, right? I need that solution. So it is important to actually accelerate the build process from with your conviction, translate that into validation as quickly as possible. For us, that was something, that framework to think like that was missing internally, right, as bootstrappers. So we took our own sweet time to actually launch. But from the time you launch, you realize that it's never going to be perfect, right? Because you think you're actually shipping something perfect, but it's never perfect. That is the beginning of your 0.1 version of your product, right? And then your vision. And that took so many cycles, so many months to actually, I wish we could shave off like a couple of years of our journey very easily if I were to do it all over again. Easily 2-3 years in terms of mistakes.
Wow. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, first of all, so then let me ask you like this. How did you get the product market fit? How did you know you were onto something? If it took you so long, at what point did you realize that you're really actually solving an issue that people's life would be changed in the sense they could not live without you guys?
Sure. So the problem validation is something in terms of customer development, we were doing this right from the very early days. So because we decided that it's going to be global play, what we started doing from the initial days was to hang out in different forums where the potential customers were there. And for me, what comes naturally is customer support. So I used to hang out in forums and look for people who are looking for PayPal recurring billing, authorized or not recurring billing, and or somebody in Stack Overflow saying, how do I do this on top of this? And in the absence of a solution, how do I solve a customer problem? I used to just offer that as a free support to everybody, right, in these forums. And that is enough validation for you to know that the problem exists and this is how it's solved in the absence of your solution. But over a period of time, I used to sign off saying, okay, as we got closer to our launch and all that, I used to say, hey, this is how you do it better. But by the way, we are launching our product. If you would like to check it out, you can sign up for beta, right? And then I used to sign up with that. And we built like 300, 400 people signing up before launch so that we could handpick and curate the right ones who should be our beta customers because we wanted to do the setup for them, learn the pains of doing that, and also make sure that we are onboarding the right set of customers in the early days. Otherwise, they might pull us in different directions, right? So we wanted to ensure that we do that. And we did not know how to price the product right. So we just came to some pricing and all that. But the most important part is shipping, getting this in the hands of people, and getting their validation to know, are these the right people who are using it the right way you imagined it solving the problem.
Right. Well, I mean, that's a lot of phenomenal advice for a new entrepreneur. You know, first of all, the sense of urgency is an incredible thing. And then sense of just like, you know, testing it out and obviously choosing the people that are going to beta test it together with you to see if they're the right thing or not. So right. As a leader, as a CEO, as you grew a company from, your friend's apartment all the way to what it is now, you have 124 employees, raised a substantial amount of capital. You're based in California and in India. How did you grow as you personally, your own personal skills as a CEO and as a person, like from the just four friends, trying to create something because, a startup is cool and it's a great thing to do and build, not even thinking about how you're going to make money, just doing it because you wanted to do it. How did you personally grow as your own personal thing as a CEO too?
Sure. So through the initial days, one of you asked about the lessons. One lesson is definitely talk through some of these challenges and talk it out with the people, right? We never used to do that much internally, right? And then none of us actually wanted to be the CEO or said, okay, I will be the CEO or anything, right? It was always a case of, okay, we'll just do this. We never cared about the titles. But externally, once it started being necessary, then that is when we said, okay, so you have to be the CEO because external facing, you're meeting investors and all that, right? So you get designated as a CEO. But this imposter syndrome, as they call it, right, is very true in a lot of sense where it's a role play, right? It's important to actually internalize what that role deserves, right? So over a period of time, I've learned that it's not about it's not saying it's not to please your ego. It's not to actually say that the title doesn't mean anything amongst the founders, right? We say that the founders of ChargeBee, right, that group is at a higher level than the individual roles we play as CEO or whatever. But understanding the nuances of that role, meaning it is to give direction, right, and it is to resolve conflicts, it is to say things with clarity so that others are able to follow you in a direction that you learn on the job over a period of time in terms of why that is necessary. I don't think there is a specific playbook or a specific way in which you just suddenly start playing that role really well. But I think every one of us will evolve into that role, right? Just like how a CTO role, what is demanded of this person. The initial days, nobody is a VP of engineering, nobody's a CTO, but then it's one person who's a CTO and VP of engineering, right? But all we say is co-founder and CTO. But understanding that if you have to wear the VP of engineering hat, your job is delivery and on-time delivery to enable business. CTO's role is picking the right technology stack, ensuring the availability, scalability, and things like that. You actually wear different hats to actually deliver different promises is important. I think now I've grown to actually enjoy this role to say, okay, my job, as long as I do, is to ensure that I give directional clarity to people, ensure that there is internal and external alignment in terms of messaging, right? Things like that, right? So there are a few things, and I never run out of money, right? So, so things like that, I've learned to actually embrace that over a period of time. I think it's each of us will have our own personal journey in embracing that role, but I think the most important thing is to say accept it.
Okay. You mentioned somewhere, I came across somewhere, you mentioned a lot about shutting the excuses out and moving forward.
Yes.
No.
Oh, wow. Your research is very thorough.
Elaborate that more, because, as let's take it back like this. You started your company in 2011. Now, at that point of time, starting a company in India, especially, it was unheard of. You only had, let's say, Flipkart was small then. You had Taxi for sure. You had Ola. You had, very small, Zoho. You had very small companies. Not so many startups like there is now. And the startup ecosystem and the support then was not as much as there is now. Which is, you're one of the pioneers in that industry back then, a decade ago, and obviously now. So in a lot of time, people now, if only I had the right co-founder, if only I had money, if only I had the right product, and everyone has excuses. So elaborate more and shutting the excuses out and just moving forward, and not dwelling in the what ifs and whatnot, just go on about that. Sure.
Yeah. I'm not sure I agree with the word pioneer, right? Because there are so many hundreds of years where I used to work for this company called Tata, right? They are an industry pioneer, right? For 150 or more years, they've existed, creating a conglomerate. So there are a lot of companies that I respect that have been created globally, but yes, definitely SaaS as an industry, especially global play, there were very few companies in 2011, and the support system was lacking as well, especially in B2B SaaS. So for us, the conviction came from the fact that this is a team that can deliver, right? So for me, there was no question of looking back in terms of, okay, so here is my framework for thinking, right? So there are different ways in which people think about it. For me, it is a regret minimization framework kind of thing where I was, and plus the opportunity cost. So my argument with my wife was something like this. I said, so if I were to quit and do my MBA, right, I will not earn for 2 years. And I would have also paid them a lot of money to actually learn a lot of skills. And then I would have lost X number of dollars or rupees, right? So based on my estimate, it was minimum of about $50 to $70,000 in opportunity cost if I were to quit my job and then not earn anything plus pay, right? And this is an Ivy League MBA, and then you still are with a debt of 60, 70 lakhs or $70,000. And at the end of it, I might actually end up becoming a better employee. I may not be able to have the risk appetite to start a company. But if I were to start a company and then do this today, 2-3 years, I might have learned a lot of things, whatever. Look at it as a fast track MBA. And then at the end of it, if I will still be a better employee, right, at the end of this, and I might find a better job, and that's totally okay. But I will really regret it if I don't try starting a company. And that was one. Second one was 1.5-2 years into the journey was the fear of will you actually remain employable because the product is not making money yet. You have just barely shipped the product and you want to ensure that you actually want to keep going. And the fear of actually seeing your bank balance come down really, really fast, and then you're still putting in money. And what I did was we had saved up and then bought an apartment, and I was still paying the loan, EMI monthly loan. And I convinced my wife that we'll earn it back later. Right? I want to ensure that your lifestyle doesn't change. This was an advice that one of the VPs of in my previous company, he advised me before quitting. He was an entrepreneur who had joined them as post an acquisition. And the last day I was leaving, he said, Krish, whatever you do, make sure that you have 36 months of runway. Don't change the lifestyle of your family, right? If they are used to second class AC in car, make sure you do that. In a train, make sure you do that. If you fly by air flight, make sure they do that. Whatever is your current lifestyle, just make sure that you continue or don't change it drastically, because you will start feeling guilty that you have changed something for them. And with that regret, you might quit. He said, just make sure you stick it out and don't change anything for them.
Such practical advice.
Yeah. Practical advice, right? Because it's a guilt is something that is super crazy because it might make you quit.
Right.
And so what I did was I sold the apartment, put that money in the bank and said, okay, another 1.5-2 years, we don't have to worry about your personal cash flow. Don't worry about it. Nothing changes. And the reason why I did that was, if not with this team, right, I could either think that I can go back to job and then come back later and all that, but I may not have the right team and then the right problem to solve. And you won't get a second chance at it till like a long period of time. And I wouldn't know if I would actually be able to move on without regrets if I actually quit at that point, right? And I am somebody who like to sticks it out. And then at least that was my thought process. I said, okay, with or without anybody's help, we are going to build it out. And that was one. And then with the VCs and anybody with whom we were actually raising capital, it was a similar approach where the impression we were continuously giving was, with or without them, anyways, we wanted to build a company, right? So, but it is amazing that they supported us, and then we are very thankful for them being part of the journey, and that and being able to attract those good investors like Axel partners through the early stage, Tiger Global and all that through the early stage was phenomenal. But even without them, we were convinced that we were going to take a stab at this, a honest stab at it, to try and build a company. Yeah. I think that regret minimization framework and just wanting to see it through really helped. Does that answer your question about that?
I guess, I mean, that also answers the question, like, what would you tell your younger self? Like, you know, if you look at Krish, like, you know, when he's 26 years old, 27, what would you tell him? I guess that could be similar over there too. But that's like, you know, you see, like, I mean, first of all, you touch upon a few points. Like, you know, I was actually having this conversation with somebody recently about the importance of a relationship and the importance of a relationship for a founder. Hello?
Hey.
There you go. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
You know, the point, like, you're having discussion about like having a founder having a relationship or not, and if there's an added value, there's not added value, and the right relationship, obviously, if it, you know, if a spouse or a better half, is so much support for the founder that it should, to a certain degree, should be a prerequisite to start a company, because you could come home, you know, you have support, you have someone encouraging you throughout the way, and you know, you had that. I mean, in hindsight, thank God everything worked out. You know, you have a phenomenal company, you know, and everything's great. But I actually love that practical advice in the sense that an investor gave you. Don't diminish your lifestyle. You know, continue going. That's incredible.
Right. He said you can actually change your lifestyle, right? You can go by bus, right? And I changed it, right? I used to travel by car, and then I switched to two-wheeler for the first 3 years, simply because I felt like this is a waste of petrol, right? And then a lot of money. And then I did the math, and I was like, two-wheelers way too cheaper. And then I just switched to two-wheeler. My dad bought that for me because I had bought like several bikes for my younger brother, and then he felt like, okay, he owed me one, and then he said, okay, I'll buy this for you. Maybe he felt like sorry that I was. But yeah, so you can go through whatever you want, but I think the key is not to feel guilty.
Right.
And whatever you need to do to ensure that you don't feel guilty is important.
Right. So let's ask a few other, broad questions, because culture is the most important thing, obviously. To a certain degree, it builds a company. It makes a company, to a certain degree, it even determines if the company will be successful or not. How important is the culture by ChargeBee? And I'm sure it is. But how do you go about building and sustaining a culture?
I think by being closely involved. So when we talk about culture, right, we don't have like clearly defined one that we amplify even today. Right? 7 years into the company, we still haven't done that saying these are our values. Meaning we have done some exercise, but then we have not really amplified it that much. But we all know, right, what are the things that we deeply care about and our decision framework, right? When it comes to the customer obsession, that is one of those. So we are talking about culture. So the decision framework, right, by a common group of people is what defines the culture, right? So we don't have anything codified in terms of set in stone saying this is who we are. But at the same time, we know our operating principles to a large extent in terms of how we like to work. One of the things that we've always obsessed about is customer first thing, where two of the founders have always been in customer support. And we found it very hard to actually give it away for a long time. And then we had to let go simply because that's the right thing to do, and then enable that person. And customer empathy, right? So this comes naturally where when you try to actually solve a problem, deeply understand the problem context before you actually try and offer a solution, right? It's almost like interrupting if you try to don't ask questions deeply enough before you offer a solution. Otherwise, it might feel like you are actually trying to hear only part of the question. They may not know that sometimes it's actually a little difficult for the customers because they are saying, can I do this? Right? And then you are asking, why do you want to do that? Right? Can you tell me a little bit more about the tools that you use around this? And then they'll be like, no, can you just tell me this? No. Just tell me, just be a little patient to tell me a little bit more. Maybe I can give you more alternate options, right? You need to educate the customer to be a little patient with you sometimes, right? Because they are in the middle of something. But so one of the important traits is then respond really fast so that you're not asking such frustrating questions one day later, not after 24 hours. But in the first 1 hour of actually them reaching out to you through email, are you having this conversation matters, right? Especially if it's all through emails. Then they will actually give you more context, and that's a very good opportunity for you to understand what should you have solved better in your product, right? Otherwise, you are always you create the urgency by responding later. So we try to actually emphasize some of these values in the way we measure things. So we never measure, or so far we have not measured how many tickets how long did it take to close your support tickets, but we measure how long did it take for first response. Mm-hmm. And then the next question is how many of them actually said I'm happy, right? So those are two things. And then what is the volume of ticket flow, right? So one is data driven, making sure that you're actually loading up the team depending on when people are actually asking questions more, right? So do we need to be available in the evenings of our time zone so that the peak, we are available during the peak request time, things like that, right? And when it comes to framework for product, right? So everything used to be optimized around reliability, high availability, simply because the nature of the problem. I think it's now some people call it founder market fit, but I think it was we got lucky in that sense that we have always been over engineering things when it comes to like availability, scalability, and things like that, simply because it's the nature of the solution, and then it also fits our nature to get into the nitty-gritties of very detail-oriented things, like how we like to build things. Right. So it fit from an engineering product culture perspective as well as the customer-first approach. But the real challenge is continuing to add people into the team and actually helping them see things the same way you do it, right? Like we don't like to micromanage, but then you probably bring in a lead and then allow them to hire like 2-3 people. You can be part of the hiring process, but you are allowing somebody else to manage the rest of the team. But do they appreciate how you are actually managing them? And then asking them to manage the way they like to be managed. How do you teach that, right? How do you help them see the difference? Now, suddenly, you're moved away from just building the problem, solving the problem, building a company, to suddenly grooming people and teaching them the framework, translating the framework with which you like to think to them. So a lot of people are able to operate the same way, right? And that is where the challenge comes. I think even up to this point, I think you mentioned 124, we are now 174 people in 2 different time zones. One of the primary challenges now we are having is how do you spend more time spending on one-on-ones and skip level discussions, so that we understand where they come from, who they are, and also translate some of our learnings to these people. And these learnings accumulate so much, right? And then now how do you actually translate that in a scalable format? Those are all challenges in actually continuing to build a larger team. But one thing we have been trying to consciously do is do less and less in terms of the tactical things, to build teams which will actually take over that. We spend time in building the organization, right, which is the root of the problem that we wanted to solve. Now we are actually creating the team that will allow us to actually do that. Right. So it's an interesting journey.
I mean, there's just so many questions I have from this perspective there. I mean, that's the end of the day. You know, you're at a point right now. You're at a very pivotal point. You know, and you know the hardest thing is a lot of you just mentioned before, also to give up. You know, as a founder, you know, we not necessarily, we don't want to micromanage, but we want everything to be perfect. And we pay attention to every single little hook and crook and every little detail. And we want people to view it, to have our way of looking at things. And that's the hard part, to giving up control, letting people take care of it, and letting people looking at it from their point of view and being open-minded. You know, it's very difficult.
Right. I think the key is to acknowledge that you don't want things to remain the same, right? That's not why you are actually bringing in others. You want things to change for better, right? So one is a deep appreciation for what is collectively built, right? And then acknowledging the fact that the people that you add, right, are changing things for better, and then continuing to evolve with it is important, right? So continuing to accept that becomes the key. So what we actually try to teach is be a little bit more patient, take a longer term view of relationships, right? And then one thing we try to tell people is you should actually go on to build a company. If you were to actually look at it from that lens, how would you actually deal with every one of these relationships? It suddenly changes. You're not looking at them as a peer or somebody who's actually creating out there to actually make your life miserable. Instead, you start looking at it as, okay, that is a function that needs to exist, right? And what do I learn from them, right? And what kind of person do we have on the other side who's actually enabling that? And how does it all fit in? And you become genuinely curious, inquisitive about that, right? So what I would ideally like to see is a large team that is actually aspiring to want to build their own company at some point of time. Right. They should actually, the best thing that could happen is just like PayPal Mafia, if there are a lot of people actually go on to build better companies as the next generation, the next 5 to 10 years out of ChargeBee, that would be even better in terms of social impact.
Right.
And plus they would also be better people being here, right? Become better version of themselves. I hope that happens.
So I'm definitely looking forward for the, you know, ChargeBee Mafia to come out, you know, within the next 5-6 years, you know.
I hope so.
So what are some, like, you know, do you get a chance to read any books?
Yeah, we read a lot. I read a lot.
So give me some, like, what are your top, you know, business entrepreneurial books that you think that should be like a prerequisite or, you know, for people to read?
I will have this recency bias towards whatever I remember right now, right? I think the most, of course, the top of the list is Hard Things About Hard Things and others, right? But at any point of time, I like to read non-fiction, right? Biographies. And then I also read my native, which is Tamil, right? I speak Tamil, read Tamil. And I also read history quite a bit. So at any point of time, I'm also consuming books on Audible, Kindle, and then physical books, right? And I don't mind actually juggling across books, throwing it away if I don't like it. I don't like to. So they become a little impatient with that. But then some books I would highly recommend are Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. It was an engaging, amazing, easy read. And you can actually relate to that journey where the company was about to die several times over, right? For different reasons like that. Because he was selling more, he could have died. Right? And it was like super amazing to actually try and understand that, right? How could that happen? You're selling more. And because of that, the company could have died. And so Shoe Dog's journey and then the passion for actually continuously innovating on the product was phenomenal. Hard Things About Hard Things, I think I mentioned it. I also liked listening to Alexander and the Virtues of War,
Okay.
which is fiction about how Alexander in his time might have actually gone through his life when he actually became someone 17, 80-year-old taking over the kingdom from his father, and then how he might have done that. So it's a dramatized version. It's a brilliant story. I loved it. Everything Store. I'm just going through my Audible list, and then I also keep the same thing in books. Of course, Sapiens and all that is great. Zingerman's Guide to Great Customer Service. It's fantastic. I'm reading Principles by Ray Dalio.
Phenomenal book.
Phenomenal book. Yeah, and then there are, of course, the standard ones like Radical Candor, Elon Musk's by Ashley Vance. The other one I loved is Alibaba, the House That Jack Ma Built. Is really good.
Have not read it.
By Duncan Clark. He was part of the journey, and then it's an insider's view of how he saw that. That is, he was a Westerner who was part of Alibaba team, and from his perspective, how do you actually look at things?
Wow.
It was an interesting story.
So let me ask you like this then: Who do you look for as a mentor or as a guide? Like, who's your entrepreneur? That you're like, wow, he built something incredible, and I want to follow in his direction.
Right. Interesting question, right? The honest answer is I don't believe that there should be one person you should actually idealize and then look up to. Right? There should be multiple role models because each one's journey is different. I like to believe that that is how it should be. Dharmesh Shah is someone I look up to, CTO and founder of HubSpot. Phenomenal guy who has taken a very different route to actually how he has built that company. First company, the journey about the first company, and the regret that he should have sold it earlier, much earlier, quit that and go on to build the other one was actually very interesting. And somebody who's very hands-on in how he has done it. I look up to him a lot. I've never met him in person.
Not yet.
Amazing. Yes, not yet. I also have Dorai Todla here as a mentor, right? I keep saying that I would like to grow old like Dorai here because he was one of those very first guys who built, you might know about Infosys, which is a service company, like Tata Consultant Services. Infosys is another company. But Dorai started this company as the same age group as those founders, called Coromandel Software. And his journey about building a product company back in 80s was phenomenal. And he was one of those very early guys who got into product companies from those days and still writes code, is passionate about Python and teaches kids, goes to schools, colleges, and he's still mentoring and continues to run a company called iMorph as a CTO while doing all of this. Right? He's one of those people I look up to as somebody who's really having a great social impact by teaching people, right? And one of those things I would love to do. Other than that, there are a lot of founders, but I would say blogs are a huge source of inspiration for us in terms of how people build it out there. Joel Spolsky, I think I mentioned about Joel Spolsky. Recently, I met Michael Pryor over a dinner, which was a surprise dinner. So it was actually a fanboy moment for me to actually meet Fog Creek Software founder. Blogs wise, recently first round OpenView partners. They are amazing blogs. And I had a lot of learnings from both sides of the table. Mark Suster, never met him so far, not yet. Yeah, and his blog has been phenomenal in the early days to actually understand how he looks at things as a two-time founder and became a VC later. What perspectives are. He always has this compare and contrast approach to everything from his previous journey to now. And his perspectives have been phenomenal for me to learn from. So I think I'm just genuinely thankful for a lot of people who actually write out there and do things out in the open. It's such a great learning experience to build a company from wherever we are.
So let's say like this, from based off all those inspirations that you're getting from those founders and those investors, let's turn the tables and say, if a founder wants to get a hold of you or pick your brain or get your inspiration, how would they do that?
I do spend time on my weekends a little bit, but then I think the best way to reach is emails, krish@chargebee.com. More than happy to share thoughts, help out whatever I can, right? To share notes, right? Basically, so you can avoid mistakes. Whatever we have done, right? You can avoid those mistakes, make new mistakes. I'm also active on Twitter, fairly active on Twitter, but I don't write that much, but CB
Okay.
Charlie Bravo Krish. CB Krish is my handle
Mm-hmm.
on Twitter. Charlie Bravo Krish. Yeah, so feel free to email. I'm more than happy to do that. And then when I'm traveling, more than happy to catch up in person or a coffee and then share notes.
That's amazing. I hope someone takes advantage of that opportunity. And I'm sure they will. You know?
Right.
But Chris,
We'll do
first
that.
of all, thank you so much. This has been absolutely amazing. You know, I've learned a tremendous amount. First of all, how ChargeBee came about. I've learned a tremendous amount from you, how to build out the company and everything. It's been really, really amazing. You know, the personal lesson that I've took out from this, one of the main lessons and many lessons was, you know, don't be afraid. Just move forward and just do it, you know. Shutting all the excuses out. Don't let anything get in the way of that, you know, and just hustle forward, you know. And also, I think one other touch point you talked about was the sense that, you know, you did it in hindsight. Like right now, you can look back at the journey and say, wow, you know, you built an amazing company, you know, phenomenal workforce. You have a substantial amount of capital to build out and, you know, take on the next, you know, go for the next bunch of years. But in hindsight, you started off a company because you just wanted to build a company. You just wanted to hang out with your four co-founders and build it out, which is the way a company should be built. You know, you weren't chasing anything, which is just amazing. You know?
I think the journey is the reward, right? I think, yeah, in hindsight, if we look at it if we try to connect the dots from here to then, it might look like there was always a plan in terms of how everything will actually work out. And that's never the case. I don't think that was the case for us as well. But it's always, once we start building for the right reasons, and then somehow you figure it out over a period of time. I think that is when it's more fun, right? You don't look at there are always enough problems, there are always enough challenges in building anything. But I think we learn to actually appreciate the better things along the journey only by doing it for the right reasons. So.
Right. Well, we'll definitely read about it in your upcoming book, right?
I wish.
Very soon.
Right. Yeah.
But thank you so much.
It's
been an absolute pleasure. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. You know, it was really amazing.
I loved it. Thank you so much. You asked some great questions. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Have a wonderful day. Bye.